Tracy Hellstrom. I'm Vice President of Brand and Content Marketing, and you can read the bio. But really what I wanted to say, just as we were kicking things off here, we're here to talk about XDR. And in my career, I've been at the front end of a lot of technologies. And so I think this is a really important time for everyone to take a look at the technology and really understand what it is and how it can be deployed. In the case of XDR that we're going to be talking about today, we have a couple of experts from the company here to share with you a little bit about what XDR is. But I think it's, even if your clients and your customers aren't asking for XDR yet, it's a great time to start to evaluate what it is, how it suits you, and how you want to kind of build your business, and ultimately how it can then benefit your customers. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to have a chat with our two subject matter experts today on extended detection and response, or XDR. But we are at the very beginning in a technology cycle of 10 to 15 years. We're just really a few years in on this. And so hopefully this will be helpful to answer some of those questions for you. With that, I will let Ricardo introduce himself.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you happen to be. My name is Ricardo Arroyo. I'm a Principal Product Manager here at WatchGuard Technologies. I came over from the Hexus Cyber Solutions acquisition back in 2016. So I've been here about, it's going to be 7 years in June. And yeah, I have tons of cybersecurity experience because I used to work for the National Security Agency many years ago. And I've been basically working on all of WatchGuard's cloud services over the past 7 years, whether it be, the WatchGuard Cloud Platform, TDR, or our newest, upgrade to the platform, which is ThreatSync.
Awesome, thank you, Ricardo. We also have Manu, who's coming to us all the way from Spain. So Manu, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Tracy. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. So, well, I joined WatchGuard in 2020 because, well, Panda Security was acquired by WatchGuard. I am working in this sector. Actually, it is 25 years in this month because I started in May 1998. So I want to share with you the evolution of the security, and I will try to explain you how XDR, why is so important XDR, and why it fits in the evolution we are seeing in the security, and how it will help you to grow your business.
Thank you. So you have a couple of real experts in this industry with you today. And so again, remember the question box. Feel free to drop things in. But we're going to start out. We're just going to have a chat as with these folks about what some of the important elements of XDR are, and we're going to use you to help get us into some of those topics. And so we're going to start with some poll questions, or at least have poll questions throughout. So hopefully this is a good time to go to or actually it should come up, right, Liz?
Yep, just launched it.
Awesome. So we're asking you a question, and we're going to start really at the basics because there's been a lot of confusion out there. I hear, you start to hear XDR, you have some vendors, security vendors, or solution providers who are starting to offer some XDR products, but they aren't necessarily all the same thing. So let's get into a little bit of kind of some of the definitions of XDR. And we'll see where we are on our poll here. So we're asking you just to get us started with really what does that acronym mean, XD and R.
I'll give everyone about 10 more seconds to submit their answers.
Awesome. All right, so it looks like from what I saw that most people had that correct. There we go, 95% of you, okay, give yourselves a pat on the back, said extended detection and response. And that is what XDR stands for, but what does that really mean is what we're gonna get into with our panelists here. And so Ricardo, I'm gonna start out with you. You've been working with our XDR product, and obviously there's a lot of discussion around what kind of are the elements that make up an XDR product. How would you define XDR?
So the kind of concrete definition that the industry and the analysts are kind of standardizing on is it's a detection and response service It's vendor specific for detecting threats. I'm sorry, I got lost there for a second. My apologies. Vendor specific threat detection and incident response tool. All right. It has to include the telemetry from at least 3 products, and it uses that telemetry and advanced analytics techniques to create new detections that you couldn't from individual products. And the Gartner definition is very focused on vendor specific, because again, in their eyes, only the vendor can really detect deeply and understand their products to a degree to find something new and interesting that provides enhanced security. The 2 terms you'll find in the industry that's everybody's been solidifying on is a native XDR solution, which is that vendor specific one, and then an open XDR solution, which some vendors are choosing to do more of an ecosystem thing where they integrate with a lot of other products. So that's native versus open XDR.
Awesome. Manu, you've been working a long time with our endpoint and EDR solutions. Where do you see XDR coming from, and what are some of the other solutions it might be compared to?
Yeah, I would like to explain XDR as the evolution as we are seeing in the endpoint security. As you said, I remember when we were protecting customers with antivirus technologies. I remember that we were doing our best with the collective intelligence, with heuristics, and it was a good technology for detecting known malware, but it was hard to detect unknown malware with antivirus technologies because, well, we didn't have visibility of what was going on in the endpoints. So I remember that hackers had access to different webs, so they could check if the malware that they were creating was going to be detected by the different antivirus technologies. So it was quite easy for them to create unknown malware. So there was an evolution point very important in 2015 or so, when the endpoint detection and response solutions were released. From this moment on, we started to have visibility of what was going on in the applications. So we started to monitor what's happening there. And if a customer was infected, we had visibility of what happened. So we were able to create contextual or behavioral detection. So not signature files-based detections or collective intelligence-based detections. So generic detections based on the behavior. So every single attack doing the same kind of technique, using the same kind of technique, will be detected. So when we were trying to evolve the EDR solution, the key point was to have visibility first. If you have visibility, if you are seeing what the hacker is trying to do, if you see any trace of the attack that they are trying to accomplish, you will have the chance to protect your customers. So visibility was key. So that's why we started to add firewall telemetry, register telemetry, ANSI telemetry, etc. But at some point, we didn't have the chance to add more telemetry, more visibility, and then is when XDR is a key component, because with XDR, we have the chance to gain visibility from other sources, from the firewall, from Outpoint, from the cloud, from email, from other sources to increase the visibility, and with that visibility, we can evolve in an efficient way the EDR solutions in order to detect more malware and earlier.
Awesome.
So this is my definition. Maybe it's not the standard definition. It's the evolution we have seen, and we really think that XDR is the future in terms of protecting our customers.
Yeah, for sure. And something you both talked about, which I think is really important, I'm going to encapsulate this, but I'll give you a little bit of history. So the term XDR originally, the X stood for a variable, right? And it meant to kind of represent, it was the detection and response from everything. Just a little bit of historical relevance for you there. And so again, what you're hearing from both of these folks is it's more than just endpoint, it's more than just network. It's really, you know, even the analysts, when they're talking about the native solutions, one of the reasons that becomes important is because they're the ones who get all the low level, the kind of the lowest level of data and telemetry, and can interact with different technologies at the lowest level. So these native solutions end up having some capabilities to be able to not only see, but then respond, as Ricardo kind of point out, that it's not just about seeing, but how do you get that fast response back? And so, you know, one of the things we're hearing about with XDR is not only what is it today, but what is it going to be tomorrow, right? And it's kind of a forever feature. And that's why I was saying at the beginning, we're at the very beginning of this technology cycle. Speaking of that, so having a little bit more of a sense of what XDR is, what does it really do, right? And this is for the end user. What's it mean for efficacy? What does it mean for kind of managing security overall? And I think on this one, I am starting with Manu. Is that true?
Yep. Yeah. Thank you, Tracy. So at the end, the main benefit for clients is that they will be better protected. So the more visibility you have, the more chances we will have to detect everything. So XDR allow us to have more visibility. And with that, we can cover some use cases that we can't cover with the EDR. For example, and this is something that I am always concerned, what does it happen with endpoints not protected? Or what does it happen with endpoints with misconfigurations? Or what about if we are not seeing suspicious network accesses in the endpoints? So this is the kind of things, of the kind of events that we can see with other products feeding XDR. So also, XDR will have a benefit in terms of response. We can enable different response for the different products integrated in XDR, and this is a very interesting benefit. And let me put an example here. If, for example, we have a multi-factor authentication and an endpoint solution integrated in an XDR, we could request a two-factor authentication if we are seeing that the suspicious application is trying to be executed. For example, PSEC or PowerShell, which are internal tools that are commonly used by hackers. So a lot of possibilities with XDRs in order to improve the threat detection and the threat response as well.
Yeah, and actually what was just interesting about the example you gave is that was not only a way to, you know, respond and have a more successful plan to address the threat, but it also doing so in the moment it's really needed, right? As opposed to putting a lot of controls in place that hinder people's productivity. I think that's one of the things that people end up being very concerned about with security measures is, listen, I want to have all the controls and the security and the protection in place, but I don't want the folks that are doing the work to feel like they're constantly kind of having to overcome barriers. And so, you know, it's what you just talked about is one of those great examples where you can apply what's needed to be applied given the risk scenario, and not, you know, and kind of back off in other places potentially. So really great, interesting stuff. Ricardo, anything to share there from your standpoint?
No, the only thing I was going to do is give a little bit of a like concrete example. Like, so today you have your firewall and you know your firewall is blocking a whole bunch of items, right? And you have your AV or your EDR solution and it's blocking things at the endpoint. Now, here's an example of taking those two data sets and putting them together, right? You know you've got all of these things being blocked by your firewall. Well, what if we fuse that information together? What if we take that network connection and we look for that network connection on your endpoint? What you can do once you do that is you can actually find the specific process that was making that malicious connection. And once you get that information, you can make a whole varied suite of decisions, right? Based on, well, now I know it was just Chrome, right? Now I know it was, you know, the user might have just been, you know, or an advertisement, right? But once it turns out to be not Chrome, not Edge, right? And it ends up being PowerShell, or it ends up being some third-party application that you have no clue how it got onto the endpoint, right? There you can make a new type of security decision that you just couldn't make otherwise.
Do you know, I was just at our some conferences and some security events, and one of the questions that comes up is, isn't this just the same thing as a SIEM? And it often comes up as an objection, right? That a customer might say, well, all right, I tried to do a SIEM, that was super complex, I don't have the people for that. It's not, you know, if this is just that, then I don't want to do it. Like, how would you respond to that kind of inquiry, that sort of question?
So
do you want? Yeah. Okay.
yeah, I'll go ahead and start. A SIEM typically focuses really on aggregating and normalizing data and then visualizing it, right? SIEMs really have always been about putting all the data in one place. Well, XDR is more than that. It's so much more than that, right? SIEMs, a lot of the time, again, for monitoring, we really want to make something actionable. And even as SIEMs have evolved and made things actionable, they've never had the capabilities to tie into your existing infrastructure to actually do those actions, perform those actions to remediate the problem that it discovered, right? There are other tools in the industry called SOAR tools, you know, security orchestration tools that are supposed to do that. XDR kind of takes the best and most useful pieces of that and builds it into an entire workflow that an incident responder, somebody who's working on the operations, security operations team, can go from beginning to end to do the entire site.
Awesome. Yeah, so it's a lot. It sounds like automation is really built in this scenario, and again, that ability to get the insights that make it easier to take the action. So I feel like it's an easy play, not a complexity play. All right. Anything more from you, Manu?
Well, I would say that I understand that the people confuse SIEM and XDR because it is quite similar. So because we are feeding both technologies with events and telemetry from different sources, but the objective of the SIEM is more general. Sometimes is to store all kind of logs for compliance and regulation reasons.
Yeah.
And the objective in XDR is just to feed the telemetry that we can understand and we can correlate to improve the threat detection and threat response. So I would say that the three main differences are the objective is different, the focus is different, the complexity in SIEMs in order to increase detection is much more. You need to have the skills and the knowledge for that, and also the response that Ricardo was mentioning. There is no response capabilities in SIEMs. These are the three core differences, I think.
Yeah, like XDRs are focused on security, right? SIEMs can be adapted for any number of use cases for visualizing data, right? In, you know, even for compliance purposes. XDR absolutely is not designed necessarily for compliance purposes. Some products will give you because they have access to that data, but it's not designed for it. It's not meant for it.
Awesome. All right, really great introduction into XDR, but we want to get into how XDRs can benefit MSPs. And so let's go to our next poll question, Liz. And so what we have here is, how does offering XDR benefit you all, as in particularly in your MSP operations? So we have several answers: unified security consolidation, prioritized view of threats, data, etc., earlier detection, etc., and boosting your team's efficiency. Let's see where the group is feeling that their benefits are.
I'll give everyone about 25 more seconds to submit their answers.
Awesome. So a pretty even spread. So yeah, a lot of you seeing the opportunity. So good. This is good for us to know, for the team to know that some of the things you're looking at, particularly around unification and maybe some vendor consolidation. And ultimately, I think the winner was the efficacy of XDR is one of the key reasons you're looking at it. With that in mind, let's go back to Ricardo. Ricardo, what do you think the challenges are that MSPs have, and how can XDR help ultimately?
Yes, so one of the things that a lot of the XDR solutions are really trying to address is this idea of, doing more with less, right? In essence, right? If you get the laundry list of challenges that analysts have been putting in bulleted slides all the time, we see skilled staff shortages, alert fatigue, lack of automation, right? XDR addresses all of those with this idea of doing the most that you can with the fewest resources. Addressing the answer directly about the team's efficiency and efficacy, right? That was just put in the poll. So, yes, it's supposed to address all of those. Other considerations, siloed security tools, the fact that you have to pivot into a huge ecosystem worth of different tools that are all stitched together, right? This tool is meant to reduce all of that things and maximizing what you can do with the people that you have, right? Skill shortage is a real thing. Companies are having this horrible problem of finding the right people to fill these spots. What if you could have a tool that lets you take the people you already have with a little bit of training, have them work through an entire incident response workflow instead of having to teach each person individually different tools, or the one person that does like to learn all the tools, they're wasting tons of time pivoting between applications, right? So XDR wants to break down those silos, right?
Awesome.
Yeah, I totally agree. Also, I think that there is an additional challenge, that is that the attacks are becoming more complex. I know that we are always saying the same, but it is the truth. So in the past, I think that it was easier for third-party companies to detect malware or new attacks because, well, they could do it by HAS or by indicators of compromise. But now the attacks are using the tools installed in the systems are fileless and malwareless attacks. So XDR helps in that because it will help us to increase the detection and in a faster way. So it is the other challenge I wanted to mention.
Which is the name of the game, the less time that people who get on your environments that shouldn't belong there have in your environment, then the greater opportunity to keep safe and reduce damage, right? So it sounds like our audience knows that that's something they're shooting for, and also know that doing that means efficacy and efficiency, right? I know most of the MSPs out there that I talk with, and that's not, they're interested in growth, but there's a huge focus on the bottom line. Like, how do I get my costs down, so that it can contribute to kind of profit growth, and do that in a way that doesn't hurt my reputation, right? I have to be out there in front of my security, my reputation as a provider of security. And so, it seems like XDR is a really interesting way to do that, right? To kind of accomplish both those things at once. Let's go to another poll question. So you're all here, so you all got the acronym question correct, right? So I know you know what XDR is, which means you've probably been thinking about it. And so where are you in your process is really what this question is. When are you thinking about offering XDR to your customers? Either you're already providing it, you may be looking for something in the next months or years. So we give you some options, or you can say, I'm not sure yet. I'm just evaluating, I'm looking. Okay.
Very interesting.
It is. You know what, Ricardo and Manu, you have a great group. You have some folks that are kicking the tire. They're not sure yet. You have some who already have an offering out there and are marketing and starting to deliver XDR capabilities in a variety of ways. And you have a whole slew of folks that are looking in the next, in the next 6 months. This is starting to become a focus area of interest for them. And so,
timely webinar.
Yeah, for those folks, right? What are some of the things they should consider when they're thinking about adopting XDR? And so I think, Ricardo, we'll kick things off with you again on this one.
Right. So There's a lot of vendors out there that are offering XDR solution, whether they be traditional EDR vendors that are evolving, some of the bigger enterprise players that have a little bit of everything in the network security stack they're doing. You have to pay attention to the capabilities that are available, right? So the feature set themselves have become pretty standard, right? The ability to investigate, the ability to visualize and to remediate, and workflows, case management, right? But when considering all of these different vendors, make sure you focus on what you're going to use and what you're going to integrate into your existing managed services, right? There's a lot of vendors out there that just have this giant price for this really, in some cases, an over-bloated product that has probably 90% of features that you're just not going to use. It's nice, you're just not going to use them. You're just not in a position at this point to use all of those features, right? So pay close attention to what is it that you're getting, what capabilities that you're focusing on. One thing we found recently is that not all of the vendors that are claiming to have XDR actually have a full-blown system of automation. Or when they do have a system of automation, it's very complex. Right? So if you're in a position where you don't need a 17-step response process and you're just looking for something simple, then you need to look for those abilities, the ones that fit you correctly. Because again, some of them will have this huge price, 90% of features that you will use.
Awesome. Manu, how about you? You came out of, again, you work very closely with our endpoint product. I've seen a few XDR solutions in there that just are really just endpoint, which doesn't necessarily speak so much to XDR. What do you think folks ought to be looking for, particularly if they have endpoint solutions that are going to enhance their capabilities beyond endpoint?
I think it's important the automation. So because, well, at the end of the day, many times you don't have time to manage all the incidents that happen. So if the detection is automated and you have the chance to automate the response as well, I think this is an important point to consider. Also, the vision of the vendor, I think, is important. So if I will try to find a vendor who is able to provide endpoint telemetry key, network telemetry key as well. And I think also that the identity is a key point, as more and more attacks are starting stealing the credentials. So I think those are the three key vectors that I will take into account.
And one
more that I forgot. Pay attention to how the vendor sells it, all right? Because, and this kind of mixes a lot of things that Manu had mentioned, is that when you go to the vendor and the XDR solution is bundled with only their endpoint, you can tell that this is a mostly endpoint product, right? That the 99% of their detections are still very endpoint centric and they're doing a token network thing, right? The definition, that Gartner says is that it's a platform service. It's supposed to work with your entire portfolio, equally, not just be one solution that's slowly expanding. So pay attention to how they sell it and how it's being used, because if the only way you could use it with endpoint, it really pigeonholes you into, well, now I have to buy into their endpoint. The better vendors will provide some sort of XDR solution with every one of their products, right? If they're selling a firewall, it should be, that you should be able to use it for what it can be done on just the firewall and identity, right? So pay attention to how they sell it and what you get out of it, right? Because if right now you're only selling, one vendor's identity and firewall products, and it's tied to an endpoint SKU, then you can't use their XDR solution, right?
Manu, I'm going to go back to you for a second. One of the things that, again, we have a lot of people who are thinking about how do they bring this in the next 6 months, and they may be looking internally, right? So what do I need to have at my MSP? Do I need to add something? Do I need to have a lot of threat hunting staff or something like that I don't have today? One of the things I wanted to come back to you, I know, we all draw the lines. Like, what do you think are some things that MSPs need to look at themselves and understand that they have, what's going to enable them to have the most success with an XDR platform? And even more importantly, I want to make sure you hit, are our endpoint product has some automation built into it, and we sometimes talk about this as a XDR light, you know, or kind of an entry level, get your feet wet in XDR. And I was hoping you could talk about that a little bit too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that if you want to start adding services to your offer, you need to do it step by step. So at the beginning, I think that it is enough if you have the chance to monitor the incidents. Now that with the XDR solutions, you have all the incidents in a single pane of glass. And if you have the chance to provide the right response when necessary. And after that, you can start adding more and more capabilities in your services, and you can start to try to add detection or hunting or doing more investigation. So it is a step by step, but I will start just monitoring the incidents, giving the proper response, automating as much as I can. So and for that, I don't think that you need a lot of training, and once you give the first step, you can continue detecting, hunting, and adding more capabilities to your services, I think.
Yeah. And so Ricardo, follow up on that same question. I know we were talking with some of our partners who've been evaluating XDR platforms from a number of vendors, and one of the things they talked about was just 100% classification of files as being a key feature they were seeing coming out with the XDR platforms, whereas we kind of put that in a different spot, or we enable our partners with that in a different place. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit about that, because for some folks that are looking to ease into XDR, it might be a great place for them to start.
Absolutely. Again, so the key thing is that all of this research and all of these capabilities had to come from somewhere, and not one vendor is coming from this from scratch. Actually, the vast majority of the larger enterprise vendors that are getting into the XDR game were ones that bought into EDR really early on, and they were part of the early, standalone EDR solutions. So those capabilities that they're bringing as part of this XDR solution of 100% classification, it's still focused technically based on lots of endpoint data, right? What happens is that some vendors decided, years ago, before XDR was a thing, well, we'll do it where we can, right? And then packaged it with the EDR solution, which is, by the way, what we did, right? Before the inception of XDR, we started doing things even before what a lot of other vendors were doing it, right? So it really, from a technical standpoint, it has to do with what data do you need to make that decision. And it's just how you license it, it's up to the vendor, right? We were just lucky enough that we adopted it early enough that we put it as part of our endpoint package versus our XDR package.
Yep. You get it in the XDR package too.
You do.
Yes, because you're getting it in both. But certainly for folks that do have our endpoint solutions, it's something that is found there as well. All right, speaking of folks, so you are looking at, we're going to have another poll. So many of you are thinking about bringing this in some indefinite point in the future, or within, some of you even looking kind of in the next 6 months or so. What is stopping you today? So this is the next poll question. And like I said, some of our answers we have, the customers aren't asking for it. You're concerned about resources and what it's going to take to enable an XDR solution. You need new technology. You just need some more information, or it's, business strategy wise, it's just not yet a top priority within your business. You haven't connected the technology to ultimately what the value would be for your business. Okay, so definitely between research, so a lot of this is internal, I'm seeing from your answers. So I see resources and business strategy. Is it a top priority for your leadership versus other things, which is interesting and good in a lot of ways. I mean, that's just a different question than understanding the value of the technology itself. And so actually giving you some examples might be of partners who have done this already might be pretty helpful. And so here, let's start off with Manu. Manu, can you talk about how you're seeing some partners turning XDR into a service? Get us kicked off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we're seeing more and more partners using XDR for providing services because, well, some customers are not very concerned about security or what's, but some customers they are really, really concerned. And at the end of the day, maybe the customers are not asking about XDR, but they want to have predictable costs. They want to focus on their business. They don't want any surprise. And we don't want they get infected and then they ask us about XDR or multi-factor authentication solutions, as it happens with some customers. So we want to protect them before the malware or ransomware attack them. So we need to let them know how important it is to get better protected with XDR. I really think that we have an opportunity to offer managed security services using XDR. And this is what we are seeing in more and more partners. They are using this feature to monitor all the incidents, all the threats, and to give the proper response when they're necessary. Also, they are using some features present in the endpoint security products, such as the endpoint risk monitoring and patch management. With the endpoint risk monitoring, it is probably for those who have the WatchGuard endpoint security products, you know that feature, and it allows you to know for every endpoint if the protection is running properly, if you have misconfigurations, if there are critical patches pending to be applied. With that information, you can really offer a value proposition to your customers, because most of the issues of the infections that the customers are facing is because the protection wasn't running properly or there were misconfigurations. So with these features, we are seeing partners including this as an optional proposition in the offer. So for those customers who just who are more price sensitive, they are just reselling the solutions. But for customers who are more concerned about security and they want to have predictable costs, they don't want any surprise, they are selling services, managed security services, using the solutions and now the XDR feature included in our USP to monitor incidents and to give the proper response. And it is working very, very, very well. It will allow you to, I really encourage you to do that. It will allow you to have a differentiated value proposition and not just to resell the solutions, but to add real value to your customers. Probably many customers are willing to pay more if you are adding managed security services to your offer.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, a lot of discussion these days about monitoring, right? How do I monitor my customer's environment? And providing this as a service is the beginning of that. It's not everything that everybody wants, but can be, again, an entry point. Hey, you're able to monitor, provide some value, and remediate super fast. That patch management, being able to kind of very quickly find those vulnerable devices and get them where they need to be is critically important. Ricardo, what do you have to share with these folks about how they can enable, a service using XDR?
Fantastic question. So there's two things. There's kind of two categories that it falls into, right? Is use it for what you can to make your managed services and your processes more efficient, right? Even if your customers, it's interesting, the poll questions, the way they came up is that we don't necessarily have enough resources, or it's not important to our customers, it's not part of the strategy for our customers. So you don't necessarily have to use it in front of the customers and let them know, hey, we're using this great service, you should pay for it. From day one, when you start using it, the operational efficiencies that you gain for it warrant its use at your level, at the MSP, right? So that's going to increase your bottom line because of the efficiencies that you'll gain. You'll get to do more with the personnel that you have available to you. right? And then as time goes on that you start integrating, you become more confident with your XDR solution. Then at the time of, let's say, renewal or for a new customer, you start presenting the capabilities of the tool and show them, like, this is the level of additional security that you're getting when purchasing, buying into us, or we've added this capability over the last 6 months that you didn't even know about. That's your opportunity at that point to either sell them on your next higher package of managed service, or to just upgrade someone from silver to gold on their renewal, right? Because once they see how rich and how powerful this tool is giving them more security, they're likely not going to want to manage it themselves anyway. So there's your opportunity to get a little price increase in your package.
Awesome. So you get to do both in that scenario, right? You get to decrease your bottom line, drive some efficiency into your organization with this automation and intelligence platform, and then turn around and maybe on some of your higher packages, higher level packages or more comprehensive packages, be able to bump up the price a little, introduce kind of a managed XDR service and capitalize on that. And it's even better for, at least with WatchGuard, it's a platform feature, right? You're not paying extra to WatchGuard for XDR. You just get it. Mm-hmm. Really, really interesting stuff. Thanks to you both. I guess, Ricardo, any additional information? Our chief product officer likes to talk about XDR as a forever feature. That it's just there's so much even increasing opportunity to continue to evolve the technology and deliver even more and more value. That it's very exciting, right? And so anything you see that can ultimately be, hint at what the future is for MSPs to be able to kind of drive even greater value into their services?
Sure. In addition to the stuff that I said earlier, right, the plan that WatchGuard has for XDR is that evolution, right? To start off with something, something small, very consumable by everyone, and evolve the service with our MSP partners, right? So the idea would be early adoption, on board with WatchGuard, and then as we come out with new features and new capabilities, as your analysts and your technicians start becoming more comfortable with the technology and the capabilities, you'll grow with us. And again, as you grow with us, you grow these managed service offerings, right? You might be a 2 package, you might offer 3 or 4 in the future, and we want to grow with you in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So, and again, you've been watching WatchGuard continue to add to technologies to our portfolio over the last 5 years in particular, grow from primarily firewall to now a true portfolio company with a lot of technology offerings for security. And that's not going to end, right? We continue to do that as we move forward. And so each time we do, obviously we're looking at how we can embed that into an XDR offering and continue to drive insights and continue to find those moments when action needs to be taken and automate them. Right? It's pretty exciting stuff.
Yep.
All right, we're going to take just a couple minutes here. I want to remind you that there is a question box. I'm starting to see some questions pop in. But before we get there, why don't you just talk, Ricardo, a little bit about ThreatSync, which is our XDR solution, and kind of give people an overview of that.
All right, yes. So ThreatSync. ThreatSync is our WatchGuard Cloud platform service that's going to enforce XDR solutions. If you're familiar with the previous generation, we called it threat detection and response. It was doing XDR and solving XDR use cases before XDR was even an idea in somebody's head, right? Way back in 2017. So what we've done with ThreatSync is we've taken all that experience and we've put it directly in WatchGuard Cloud natively. So as a central piece, it's going to be a dashboard where all the threats that you get across the WatchGuard portfolio are going to centralize and displayed in a really intuitive incident responder workflow, right? What ThreatSync does is it takes the detections that you've already been getting on your Firebox and on your endpoint and put a holistic score that allows you to prioritize what things you need to focus on first. It provides, again, those XDR use cases where you just from the 2 data sets, the 2 or 3 data sets we have available, you can come up with an interesting new detection, like what was the process that made that malicious connection? Or another one is the 0-day use case where I'm going to download a file over the internet, over the web, and it gets downloaded, but we find out after the fact that it's malicious. We have the opportunity with XDR to correlate it to an endpoint, to find where it ended up on how many different computers, and actually after the fact remediate it, even though it took us a few minutes to determine whether it was malicious or not, right? Those are the power that you're going to get with ThreatSync. Key thing, it's zero configuration, right? That's one thing that I want to point out here. Whenever you get into WatchGuard Cloud and you have one of your capabilities that ThreatSync is included with, all you have to do is browse to the page, and with a single button, everything is configured in the background because we own all the products. The products are ours to configure. They're not yours to configure. We know the products. We can configure them in the background, and ThreatSync just starts working, right? And the other key thing to note with WatchGuard, with ThreatSync, is that we are not selling it separately. We are ThreatSync. Everybody gets ThreatSync as long as you buy the right product. We're including it in all of our top tier packages. So have you already? How many of you out there, you know, it'd be interesting to, if you could use the chat or hands up or something like that, if there's a way to raise your hand, how many of you already have Firebox with TSS, right? If you have Firebox with TSS, you have ThreatSync today. You have WatchGuard, you've already deployed and have WatchGuard EPDR, you have ThreatSync today. All you really have to do is go turn it on. And we wanted to make it as intuitive and as easy as possible to make it more likely that you'll go and use it and get used to it, so that you can grow with ThreatSync as we grow it into a very full and rich, capable product.
Awesome. Thank you, Ricardo. I'll tell you what it is. I have one person in the question box who says the sound went out for them. Is that just them or is that everyone?
It was just them.
Okay, perfect. We're gonna, in the interest of time, I'm gonna move right to questions. I've got one question already, and so let me get us, we're gonna skip this poll question. And oops, I thought there was a thank you slide. Okay, so let's go right to questions. I think this one I'm gonna start with, well, listen, you tell me which one you want, but the one that I have is really a question about DLP. And so the question is, do we see DLP as a core element of an XDR solution? And then kind of the part B to that is, do we agree that an MSP can deliver satisfactory protection against data leakage and loss, even from remote devices? So I think there's something in there for both of you. Which would you like to get started with?
You want to start, Manu?
Yeah, I can start. So to be honest, well, at least in my case, Ricardo, I wasn't thinking about DLP in XDR as the primary priority, but said that I think this is a very interesting question, because we are noticing that more and more customers are concerned about data. So actually, we were thinking about some use cases where we could protect data with XDR, as we have the control of the identity. If we are detecting suspicious users' behaviors, we could request two-factor authentication when accessing to certain data. So this is something that we are discussing. Good to know this feedback, because we always prioritize depending on feedback, but our main priority now is to add more detection, more threat detection and threat response capabilities. But who knows in the future? Ricardo, you are the man here.
Yes, it's an interesting idea. Like Manu said, it's something that we've been considering, right? Especially since, you know, an XDR solution is about detection and response, maybe not DLP, because when you think of DLP, it's very signature based, it's preventative. You match the signature, stop it wholeheartedly, right? When it comes to like data loss and the volume of data that you have available in your XDR, it might be more behavioral. Like, instead of just, oh, does this match a signature, we're going to stop it. It's like, well, it matched its signature and it was, you know, it happened in this sequence of behaviors. We could come up with something much more rich that is much more meaningful, right? Almost like a data loss response system or something like that. You know, what can we do with the types of data that we have available? And then plug that in, like you said, with identity and with MFA, you can almost do like, hey, a data loss, zero trust thing, right? There's a bunch of things that we can do in the future, but it hasn't really been a priority quite yet when we talk about ThreatSync and the XDR capabilities. Once you go log in, you see the capabilities that are available. We want to make sure that there's enough contextual data. Like a lot of the things that we're working on are reporting, providing additional context so that you guys can, so that the incident responder can be confident in saying, oh yes, I understand where this file came from. I know it's malicious, but where did it came from? How did it end up there? You know, what are the activities that it took, right? So we're really focusing on making sure that everything that you get in the UI is enriching the incident responders, the analyst's understanding in the short term, as well as making sure that we finish our consolidation and our inclusion of all of the products in the WatchGuard portfolio. So those are the things that you should see by the end of the year, is a lot of context improvements, as well as the integration of all of the products in the portfolio.
Yeah, and just to go back to, you know, this is one of the ways, this is why a native environment XDR, again, adds, you're able to kind of contextually digest and understand that. You're not trying to, you know, really understand another vendor's schema or another provider's schema in doing that, right? So it ends up being really rich in how it gets presented and how it gets handled, and how you're enabling, you know, MSP staff to be able to respond to incidents. Okay, so we're right here at the end of time almost. Just want to do, we have 2 minutes left. Manu, I'm going to start with you. What is the one thing that you would love MSPs to kind of take away from this time here today, and based on the things we've talked about? What's your number one thing?
2 things, if possible, Tracy.
Can never get away with just one.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I think SDR is more visibility, so it means more threat detection and also threat response capabilities. And the second one, and probably the most important one, I think, is that it's a tremendous opportunity to start offering services if you are not doing yet, as you will be able to monitor and giving a proper response when necessary to your customers in a very easy way. That's combined with other features and capabilities in our products will allow you to start offering managed security services if you, in the short term.
Awesome. And okay, Ricardo, same question to you. Which one thing do you want to leave folks with?
So specifically, I'm going to plug ThreatSync because ThreatSync is my thing, right? We work really hard to make sure that it is easy to use, easy to turn on, and very intuitive, right? Like I said, the vast majority, as long as you got into WatchGuard, you already have ThreatSync, and we made it a single push button to go turn it on. So there is no drawback to go and close the webinar, go turn it on, and actually see it in action, get a feel for it, right? Because you're going to have to pay for a lot of your our other competitors just to even, you know, to do a trial and rip and replace. But if you've already got WatchGuard, just go turn it on and see what you can get out of it. There was a question in the chat that I will want to answer today. The question is ThreatSync XDR, right? Do they equal? Today, yes, you can do that equivalency, but you'll notice if you go look at our collateral, it doesn't say, the name of the product isn't ThreatSync XDR. Because ThreatSync is a platform service for incident responders, going to go above and beyond XDR as time goes by, right? ThreatSync is our answer to XDR. ThreatSync will one day be more than XDR.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And there was another question about whether it's part of Total Security Suite. So that was answered in the chat. If you have TSS, you need to just toggle it on, and that gets you going. But I would like to thank both Manu and Ricardo for joining us today. Hopefully you were able to take a little bit of information away. Please feel free to continue to engage with WatchGuard staff. We're interested in what you're doing and would love to help you begin this journey on XDR. So engage with your WatchGuard account managers, or feel free to reach out and ask us additional questions. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Have a good day. Bye.